Well, given that, just last week he was telling us that he thought there was still room for diplomacy, and he was giving marching orders essentially to his diplomats to keep talking to the West on the strategic security discussions they've now been having for several weeks. It was, I think, somewhat jarring to see that he was giving marching orders to troops as well. It's not entirely surprising. I think this is one of the options that we knew was on the menu. But the reality is we still don't know where this is going, right? So he gave this speech that your report discussed that, really could be, it was quite aggressive, it was quite broad. It's really easy to interpret as justifying an invasion and really the occupation of the entirety of Ukraine, if that's what he decided to do. It was designed to draw up the support for that. In the end, he did something much more modest, although it's not minor from a geopolitical standpoint, right? And I think we'll have to see, what he does next. At the moment, there is still the possibility of avoiding a shooting war. I think he will be looking to see how Ukraine responds, how the West responds to this initial intervention, and then make a decision about whether he wants to or needs to or can do something next.
So, Sam, let's talk about that, the response and how critical that is. Many say his current aggression is because there was so little response to the various plays that he's already made against Crimea, against Georgia, in Belarus, and, of course, already in Ukraine. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's deterrence is a hard thing to prove, right? Because there have been certain things done that have been damaging to the Russian economy. They've been damaging to his personal interests. But clearly, whatever whatever is motivating this from his point of view is outweighing that. Understanding exactly why he's done what he's done yesterday and today is difficult, because from most standpoints, it would seem to make him worse off, and it would certainly seem to make Russia worse off. We can look at what's happened to financial markets, and we know that there will be sanctions coming. I think it's probably more fruitful to focus on what might happen next, right? So he seems to be putting troops right up to the current ceasefire line. He will have to make a decision about whether he wants to do what some of his advisors have said and cross that and go much further into Ukrainian territory. In which case that will start a shooting war, but it will also ramp up the sanctions, right? So there will be targeted sanctions from the U.S. and from Europe as a result of just recognizing the republics and moving troops formally into Ukraine. But there are much larger sanctions on the table, sanctions that are capable essentially of turning the Russian economy into the Iranian economy. And he will need to think very carefully about whether that's something he can countenance, especially given that the Russian public opinion may not be entirely behind this war.
When you watch the theatrics of the declaration of the independence of these regions and then him signing, the peacekeeping troops to go into those territories, one feels that he is sort of driven on this despite the economic cost. So what is his end goal?
Well, again, it's a very difficult question to figure out, because if you think about, what he's said is his end goal, keeping Ukraine out of NATO, well, what he's done yesterday probably actually makes NATO membership more likely than it was before. It certainly galvanizes opinion in Ukraine, and I think it galvanizes opinion among the NATO allies. So that does not seem to have been the goal, at least if he's consistent. I think making it very difficult for Ukraine to govern itself and to pursue European integration is and has been a goal. And to the extent that Ukraine finds itself caught up in a war of one scale or another, that's something that he can press on. But I think he's also pressing towards restructuring fundamentally the relationship between Russia and the rest of the world, something where he may feel he has a bit more independence, even if the country as a whole is a bit poorer off. One of the themes that came up a lot in his speech and in a lot of his speeches over the years has been this idea that the U.S. is pushing into Eastern Europe, is pushing into Ukraine, essentially because it wants Russia, as currently structured, to cease to exist, or at the very least to not be able to develop. And so I think this to a large extent is an exercise in using the Russian military to set up defensive bulwarks, essentially, in Europe, to draw and defend lines on the map in ways that he thinks, for whatever reason, will increase his personal security, the security of his regime.
Yeah. How plausible are statements still coming out of the Kremlin that they are open to diplomacy when we have witnessed what we did today?
About as plausible as the statements that we heard over the previous weeks that they're not planning an invasion, right? I mean, they will keep talking, and the West will keep talking, because it could always be worse, right? And there are questions of strategic security, nuclear security, missile defense, those sorts of things that really do need to get talked out, even when relations are at their bottom point, and maybe even particularly when relations at their bottom point. So I think we will see those conversations go ahead, but they're not likely to be conversations about Ukraine. They're likely to be conversations about really the relationship between Moscow, Brussels, Washington.
Sam Greene, appreciate your time. Thank you so much.